Northern California, the morning after, a scene of natural beauty in the Pacific sky. On the ground below, scenes of a natural disaster.
Back far enough where you can see it fall down. And you knew all the cars in front of it are gone.
The deadliest earthquake in the United States in more than 80 years kills close to 300 people as it snaps roadways into pieces, reduces buildings to rubble, and touches off fires.
At this point, we don't know whether they're living or dead. We haven't heard from them, so obviously something is wrong.
Brave rescue workers risked their own lives in hopes of saving others.
I don't know how the hell we're going to get them out.
This is a CBS News special report, part of our continuing coverage of the San Francisco earthquake. From Oakland, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. This broadcast comes to you live from Oakland, California, across the bay from San Francisco, the night after the great earthquake of 1989. No, it was not the big one that has been predicted for so long. One expert said tonight, when the big one comes, it'll be 30 times larger than the one last evening. This one was big enough, certainly big enough for anybody here. It was big enough to bring cities in Northern California to their knees, electricity out for long periods of time, hundreds of thousands of people afraid to use the gas and other utilities. Death, destruction, not everywhere, but a lot of it. And when the big one comes, it's bigger than this one. Certainly a lot of people around here don't want to be here when it does come. This earthquake was also big enough to kill more than 250 people in one place, and that place is right here, right back there, Highway 880 in Oakland. What happened is the top part of the highway came crashing down on a roadway below, and literally hundreds of people were trapped and killed in their cars when that happened. Understand that when an earthquake happens, there's this tremendous sway and roll like nothing you have ever felt before in your life. And particularly, I think if you're in an automobile, there's a strangeness to it, especially if you haven't been through it before. And remember, this earthquake is one of the largest ever in this country. It registered officially 6.9 on the Richter scale, with the epicenter just north of Santa Cruz, California, which is below San Francisco and Oakland. And the great San Francisco earthquake of 1906, the one that is storied about the fires that followed and all of that. There wasn't a Richter scale then, but it's believed it was on the order of maybe 8.2 or 3 or even higher. This one was 6.9, and perhaps only the Missouri earthquake of a century and a half or so ago was on a level with this one in terms of its tremendous intensity. No one argues that this was one of the largest earthquakes ever to hit a populated area in North America. That's one of the things that's made it so bad. One of the impressive things that you see and hear and feel around here is the way these communities and these people are pulling together. And you can see it right back here, last night and today. Workers with blisters on their hands, working with it back in their hands, with everything they can find to try to pull people out of those automobiles. And when the mayor, a good and decent person here in Oakland, said this morning, for good and decent reasons, listen, I don't think there are any more survivors in there, they cursed him and went back to work, threw themselves into this rescue effort with tremendous fury, and it's still going on, as you can see and hear around us. Well, that's part of the scene as Northern California continues trying to tally up the toll and try to measure what to do next in the wake of this very large earthquake. Now, our CBS News correspondent stationed in San Francisco is John Blackstone. He was here as the city went through the great earthquake of '89. John?
Those of us who live here live with the knowledge that it can happen, but that doesn't reduce the shock, of course, for any of us when it actually does happen. As you know, Dan, many people who live here say this part of California is so beautiful that they're willing to live with the risk.
From across the Golden Gate Bridge this morning, San Francisco was as beautiful as ever. But this is a city and a region in shock. By dawn, the fires were out in the Marina District of San Francisco. This neighborhood of comfortable and expensive houses is noted for its sunshine. But this morning, the sun could not soften the horror.
I just can't believe it. I just can't believe I just lost everything, but I loved my animals.
Houses were rocked off their foundations. 3-story buildings collapsed to 1 story. Cars crushed. It was across the bay in Oakland that this earthquake became a tragedy of monumental proportions, killing more than 250 people along a 1.5-mile stretch of freeway. The quake struck at one of the busiest times of the day on one of the busiest roads in California. Rescuers have been searching the rubble for more than 24 hours now, but still, no one is sure how many cars and people were trapped when the double-decker freeway collapsed.
I don't know how the hell we're going to get them out, okay? We have one woman who's unconscious, bleeding from the head.
I knew our freeways would be damaged. That's part of our problems we have. They're old structures designed and built in the 50s, but I'd never thought that that would be as it would be as extensive as what we saw.
The other major roadway collapse was on the Bay Bridge, the main artery linking Oakland and San Francisco. A 52-year-old bridge that carries hundreds of thousands of commuters every day. Just after the bridge started shaking, one driver started a home video camera rolling. California's Lieutenant Governor Leo McCarthy visited the wounded Bay Bridge and made a daringly close inspection of its damage.
The upper deck section doesn't appear to be the big problem. It's the lower deck section. They're probably going to have to rebuild that section from scratch. That could take up to 3 weeks.
The Bay Bridge was playing its own part in this year's Oakland-San Francisco World Series. The only traveling players and fans had to do was across the bridge. Now the bridge is out, and there are worries about the stadiums. Both were checked for damages today, and the 3rd game of the series has been postponed.
Obviously, there's been a substantial tragedy in this community, and baseball is not the highest priority.
Vice President Quayle was visiting Southern California when the earthquake hit. He flew north to inspect the damage and to promise speedy federal help. President Bush had already issued a disaster declaration making federal funds available. If there has been any good news, it is that so many buildings remained standing. Though San Francisco's main business and financial district was littered with fallen masonry and broken glass, the skyscrapers generally withstood the shaking, just as their designers believed they would.
The encouraging thing is that those buildings that were designed by modern standards perform very well. So we know we can design buildings to resist earthquakes. We know we can minimize damage. The difficult part is finding the money and the commitment